Hello and welcome to That's Not Spit, It's Condensation. I'm Ryan Beach, and on this episode, I am finally able to talk about my audition with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra because the process is completely done. If you're unaware, I auditioned for the principal trumpet position with the Atlanta Symphony. It was a long process over a couple of months. There was the first and second round for me were on October 28th. The final round was on November 15th. The orchestra round that I had was on January 15th, and then my trial week was the last week of February. And the result of all of that was I was not offered the job. Maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't know that, but what I want to do in this episode is I want to talk about it. I want to share my process. I want to share what I did to prepare. I want to share things I did a little bit differently this time around that I think were effective and helped me be successful. I'd like to talk about the rounds themselves and even share recordings or share the recordings I made of the rounds so you can hear how I was playing in this audition. And then I just kind of want to wrap it all up at the end, talking about the trial, talking about why I'm glad I did it, talking about my thoughts about it, and just where is my career going to go from here. Before we do that, I feel it's important for me to say that my desire here is not to shame the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. I do not want to just talk bad about them and try to get you all on my side that they're dumb. It's not. This is going to be nothing like that. No hires happen. A lot of people online are expressing their displeasure with all the different no hires that are happening, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. But this will not be a rant or a discussion about that. This is just going to be focused on what I did with the hopes that it benefits you listening in some way. Maybe you hear something I did when I prepared that you think, that's pretty cool, I'll add that. Or maybe you're somebody who is going to have a trial week at some point in time, and this type of thing this episode will be able to help you maybe navigate that. But this is not about making the Atlanta Symphony, talking bad about them. This is about, we're going to positively be looking at what I did. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense, and let's get started. I've got some notes here on my computer next to me, so forgive me if I need to take a second to reference them. There's a lot to remember over from the months that I've been doing this audition. So I think it's worth starting, just so I can give some context later for why this audition is so important to me. I think it's worth just talking about a little bit about my audition history. So I've taken, to my count, I've taken 25 auditions in my career. When I won Indianapolis in, I think, 2012, that was my 9th audition. When I won Alabama in 2014, that was my 16th audition. So I took a lot of auditions in that 2-year period. And then I took 8 more auditions between Alabama and Atlanta. I took New York Phil Principal, Milwaukee Principal, Cincinnati Principal, Pittsburgh Principal, Chicago Principal in 2017, Chicago Principal in 2019, then St. Louis Principal in 2022, Cincinnati Principal in 2023, and then this audition in Atlanta. And every single one of those auditions between Alabama and Atlanta, I did not even advance in any of them. I felt like I was playing well. I felt like I was going and sounding good, but I didn't even advance out of any of these auditions. So maybe if you were in my shoes, you could kind of understand how I was feeling, that I kind of felt like my auditioning days were behind me, and I was okay with that. I was really into doing content creation after I started my podcast in 2019 and my YouTube channel in 2020, and picking up clients to help them organize their practice or to get ready for learning how to do audition preparation. There was a number of things I was doing besides the job in Alabama that I was really enjoying doing, and I thought maybe I'll just go in that direction. And it's okay, other people, there's all these young kids that are coming up who sound amazing, and I was one of those kids once, but I'm no longer one of those people. And so I just, again, felt like my days of good auditioning must be behind me. So then you might ask, well, why did I take the audition if I felt that way? Well, I felt as a audition coach or an audition coach that it would be good for me to keep taking auditions so I can keep honing my process and my method of audition preparation so that I can be a better coach. And so I was looking for an audition. After Cincinnati, I wasn't in a hurry to take an audition. But when Atlanta opened up, I thought, man, that's so close. And I know people in Atlanta, so I could probably stay with them. It would be a very quick and it would be a fairly cheap way to take the audition, which often is a barrier, to taking auditions, the money aspect of it. So I just thought, you know what? I'm going to take this audition. I'm going to do everything I know how to do. I'm going to test out this theory of preparation that I've got, and just to see what happens. How does it work? In a very real sense, I didn't know if I was interested in the job itself. I was more interested in taking the audition, and so one of the things that I did differently right out of the gate is it comes from a book called With Winning in Mind by Lanny Basham. He's an Olympic rifle shooter who wrote this book about a mental management system, how to get your head right when you have something that's sort of, you got a lot of pressure coming up. And he talks about writing what he says a directive affirmation statement. I just call it an audition statement. And what you do is you write, I've got it on a piece of paper here. You're supposed to write this statement every single day. And the statement consists of a couple of elements. The first element is writing your goal in the present tense. So I wrote, I am in the finals of the Atlanta Symphony audition. This was my actual goal. My goal was not necessarily to win because I wasn't sure how I felt about the job, and I felt ethically sort of weird that if I made the finals and then went to the finals and then won the job and then had to say, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't interested in the job. I just really wanted to take the audition. I didn't feel good about that. And so my plan was to just, if I made the finals, I just wasn't going to go back in November. Again, this is like my plan early on, right? And then the next thing you would write is, why does it matter to you? Why does this particular goal or particular identity matter to you? And I wrote, because of this, I have greater confidence that my audition process is solid, and I can use my experience to connect with players wanting to learn how to audition. This will provide meaningful experiences and income I can use to support my family. So basically, I'm thinking about it as if I could do well in this audition, I would feel more confident. I would feel more confident that I would be able to, my audition process was solid or good, or that I could say, hey, this is a good system of auditioning. I feel confident now that if I share this with other people would be able to benefit from it. I would be able to connect with people who want to learn how to audition or want to just learn a different system of auditioning, and I would be able to use that to have meaningful experiences, and I would be able to make some income and be able to support my family. So this was what motivated me to work really hard. And when you're writing one of these of your own, if you want to do that, this part is very important because, as we all know, consistency of effort is one of, if not the most important thing that you need when pursuing a particular goal. You can have a bunch of great days in a row, but if you skip practice sessions throughout the process, it's just not going to be as effective as if you were just, consistent. Maybe you have some good days, maybe you have some bad, but you're still showing up. And so that component of why does this matter can serve as a high level of motivation for you to be able to just stay strong with the process. So the next component is the actual plan that you will do or you will act upon that will help you be able to accomplish the goal. So I wrote, I accomplished this by having a detailed audition plan. This plan helped me refine the excerpts and build confidence that I sound great and will play with confidence and freedom in the audition. I played for other musicians to get valuable feedback on how my playing is being perceived by others, so I could understand how to present a beautiful and effortless audition. I am in the finals of the Atlanta Symphony audition. So when I say I accomplished this by having a detailed audition plan, what that means is since the 2019 Chicago audition, I had begun refining a system of preparation that I really liked and I thought had a lot of potential. And this plan has different phases. I've talked about this on previous episodes, but very quickly, phase 1 is a focus on the technical and unfamiliar excerpts. You extract those excerpts, you leave the excerpts that you know alone, and you really focus on getting those technically difficult excerpts and the unfamiliar ones up to the level of the familiar excerpts. And at the end of this, you're trying to just make sure you understand what you want to do with all the excerpts. It doesn't really matter if you can execute all the excerpts the way you want. You just want to understand how to navigate it, what the musical ideas, the style, all that kind of stuff. That's what you want to focus on. Phase 2 is all of the excerpts, and you would run every excerpt that you would practice that day. And I've got a way to organize it so that you're not playing everything every day. But whatever you see an excerpt, you're going to run it at tempo, and you're going to record it. You're going to listen back. You're going to make some notes about things you want to improve, and then you're going to isolate those things that you want to improve and begin to explore, how would I improve this? What kind of plan can I develop, a new plan, rather, that I would approach the excerpt with? And then after you're done exploring, you would do a second repetition, but you would do that repetition under tempo, where you would be able to really focus on implementing your new plan and begin building sort of a new path, a new neural pathway, so to speak, that is the one you would want, so that as you move forward in the process, you have a new plan, a new sort of groove to follow that you would begin to myelinate and make more habitual. And the end of that is refinement. You want to refine your mental representation. You want to look at this and be able to say, I understand how to execute now. Not just I don't understand like how I want it to go, but I can actually execute the excerpts the way I want them to go. I know how to phrase them. I know how to just do everything that I want to do in terms of color and musicality. That's the main focus of that. And then the final phase, phase 3, is a peaking phase, so to speak, and the goal is presenting that plan in the context of a round. So you want to almost like step outside of practicing the excerpts individually, and you begin practicing the excerpts together in groups, which is what an audition is, right? And this is certainly applicable to, recitals or other types of competitions. You would just, replace audition list with recital, running your recital or whatever. But we're talking about auditions, so I'll keep with that language. And yeah, your goal is just to get better at playing all the excerpts back to back to back the way you want them to go. I even recommend at this point, I stopped recording towards the end of the process, and I was just playing and trying to buy into, I sound great. Everything is good. I just need to go in there and do well. And I was feeling very confident. So that's what I mean when I say detailed audition plan. So if you do something like this, you write a statement like this and you say, I have a detailed audition plan, you need to know what that means. It can't just say detailed audition plan and then you do whatever. You need to have a definition of that. And then it's supposed to help me develop confidence that I sound great and will play with confidence. The end goal of what I wanted is that I just wanted to believe I sounded great, and I wanted to be able to have confidence that I could play well. That was the end goal. And when you define something like that, this is what I want at the end of the process. It's like you're choosing ahead of time what your value system is, and then when you're going through the process, it's a lot easier to know if you're on track because you're asking, am I getting more confident? Am I sounding better? Just in sounding better, you'd have to define what that means too. What are the value systems? What does, quote, better mean? And then this one about I played for other people. What I wanted to know when I played for other people was not just how could I improve. The normal thing that we do when we play for other people is how can I improve. But I also wanted to know sometimes, am I doing what I think I'm doing? When I play Mahler 5, am I playing as passionately as I think I am? Or is it kind of boring? When I play Mahler 3 post-horn solo, is it as beautiful and as effortless as I think it is? Or am I playing with bad time and that's all people are focused on? So that helped me get a sense of how somebody else is perceiving my playing, which is what an audition is, right? It's how is the committee perceiving your playing, and are you more or less in control of that? So that is one of the main things I did differently is I defined all that stuff for myself. I began preparing on September 17th, according to my notes. And another big thing that I wanted to do differently in this audition prep is I think in previous auditions, I consider myself to be a very, colorful player. Like when it's loud, I don't have any problem exploring the high end of the dynamic range. When it's soft, I don't have any problem really trying to push that, or at least I enjoy trying to do that. But I've learned in interviews and in just conversations off podcast that that may not be the right approach for an audition. In an audition, you're playing by yourself towards the front of the stage, and that is not the same environment as playing with, 70 or 80 or more other people on stage in the back of the hall. And so I really tried to put a priority on this audition of just focusing on playing with color and thinking less about playing with dynamic range. And what that means is I just asked what sound would be appropriate for this excerpt, and then I just played with that sound. So, of course, if you're unsure, you can listen to recordings or you could take lessons with people and get an idea. But what you want at the end of that is a clear idea of what sound is appropriate, and then just play with that sound all the time. Worrying a little bit less about is it loud enough or is it soft enough, and worrying more about is it the right sound. I put a high priority on that in this preparation. And when I was preparing for this audition, I was working. The first week of my preparation was the first week of work. So we had a gala concert. The concert is not usually very heavy, so it was okay for me to work on both things at the same time. But I was already writing early on, days 3 and 4, I was already writing things like play these excerpts sooner in C. I was feeling beat up for some reason. I don't remember. This is a long time ago. But I do remember the feeling that I was trying to play excerpts like Alpine Symphony or Bartok Concerto for Orchestra or things like that. And it just wasn't going as well as I would want it to. And I was assuming that the problem was fatigue. And I was saying to myself, get this earlier in your practice session and see if that helps. Because if it does, then I know the problem is not me in the way that I'm playing it. The problem is just managing fatigue as I move forward. The first big, hurdle or difficulty I encountered was the next week, this sort of second week of my preparation. We were playing a concert that was Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony, Festive Overture, and Barber Violin Concerto Barber Violin Concerto, excuse me. So it's a fairly heavy concert. In my orchestra, I generally play everything. I could have taken the Barber off, but it's a big part with a lot of stuff, so I felt it was important to play it. And so that week was really heavy. We had a lot of rehearsals and, 2 concerts. That's the most we have usually here in Alabama. And I was also playing rounds for people. I played rounds a couple of times throughout the week for a couple members of the orchestra in Alabama, and then I had a friend subbing in the trumpet section. So I wanted to get their feedback. So I was playing a lot that week. And as you know, when you play a lot, you accumulate fatigue. And so when I was done with that week, I was really feeling it. And Monday the 30th, that would have been the Monday after the Saint-Saëns week, I should have taken that day off. It would have been smart to take that day off, but I didn't take that day off because I wanted to play for Kathleen. I wanted to play for my wife, Kathleen, principal clarinetist with the Alabama Symphony, because she's busy, and I just, the times that I would have to play for her felt like they were few and far between. And so even as I was playing for her, I was saying to her, I really should have taken today off because the excerpts just felt terrible. Like I could still play them okay, and there were some things that were going fine, but just everything felt horrible. And I knew it was fatigue, and I knew I wasn't doing myself any favors by continuing to play. But you have that sort of balance of, well, I don't feel great right now, but I really want to get my work in. And I think I chose wrong on that particular day. And I also, I lost my train of thought here. But I guess one thing that would be a positive of that, as I learned, even if I'm very beat up and feel horrible, I can still play some of the excerpts well. So maybe there's a little bit of confidence building there, but I'm not sure it was worth it was worth like the stress of, man, this feels terrible. The thing about it is, though, is because I was writing that statement, I am in the finals of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, it didn't really bother me, like from a emotional point of view. Like I could certainly recognize the problem from a physical point of view, but it didn't bother me from an emotional point of view because I was just like, I'm going to be in the finals. Like a little bit maybe manifesting, if you want to call it that. I don't necessarily call it that, but it kind of can look that way where I'm thinking, I'm going to be in the finals. So like, this doesn't bother me. This is just a bad day. Tomorrow might be better, and I'll have a bunch of other great days, and then I'll play well, and I'll make the finals. And it really helped even me out because I was trying to put myself in the headspace that no bad day was going to mean that I wasn't going to be able to make the finals or anything like that. So that was on the 30th of September. A couple days later, I played again for a bassoonist friend of mine named Marissa, who's a fine bassoonist, and this is on October 2nd, and she helped me with some excerpts and just playing for other people. I was getting feedback like, some specific stuff with things like rhythm or intonation, just some really specific information about when the rhythm or the intonation isn't quite lined up. And then I also was getting comments about just clarity, making sure I'm really focused on clarity. And then also kind of getting some big picture comments right out of the gate at the beginning, like, yes, these excerpts sound good. You sound like you know what you're doing, but you really need to like zoom out and just hear the music and play, which that's where I wanted to end up. Early on in the process, I was okay with it not looking and sounding like that because I was really just still making sure I understood what I wanted to do with it. So I was okay with that, but it was good to hear out of the gate that sort of the baseline of where I was starting was at a solid place. Now, when I was saying I should have taken Monday off, the reason I was saying that is because Tuesday through Sunday of that week, we were playing Peter and the Wolf. We had a ton of services, so I didn't get an actual time to take a complete day off after that. So the first time I could take a day off was the next Monday, so the 6th or the 7th of October. And I was actually teaching at the University of North Alabama that day, and I just didn't bring my trumpets, and I told everyone, hey, like, I can't play today. I need to take a day off. So sort of one big lesson for this is when you're not playing well and you feel like you should be playing well, my first assumption is that fatigue is the problem, and that if you can just take a day off and then come back to it, will that fix all of the problems? And are the problems not with you? Are the problems with just you've overplayed for whatever reason that you've overplayed? So I think that that's just something worth thinking about because we can drive ourselves into the ground like making up problems that aren't there when in reality we just need to rest, and that will fix all or most of the problems. So in my notes, it looks like my notes kind of stop there. So I don't really know what was going on between the 7th of October and the audition day of October 28th. I do remember a couple of days, maybe 4 or 5 days before, they gave us the semis, or the prelims and the semis list. And so I began exclusively practicing those. And then the audition day came. So again, my headspace, literally I was talking to my friend that I was staying with the night before, and my headspace was still in, if I make the finals, I just won't come back because I feel like that will be sufficient for what I want to get for this audition. That's still where my head space was at. And, okay. So for the audition itself, one important thing to mention is that on this audition list, like many audition lists, it said rotary was required for 2 excerpts, Schumann 2 and Parsifal, the overture, the opening to it. And I don't own a rotary. We don't play rotaries in Alabama. And so in past times of auditions when I've had rotaries, I've borrowed them. In 2019, I bought a rotary. I spent like over $5,000 on a rotary so that I could use it on the Chicago principal trumpet audition. And ironically, I think Schumann 2 on rotary is the excerpt that made me get cut. And then it just acted as a wall ornament hanging up on my wall. If you're watching the video of it, it was hanging on this little hook there. And so I just thought to myself, well, that's kind of crazy. So I sold the rotary to somebody who would actually use it. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to try. I tried a little bit to get a rotary, but I couldn't really get a hold of one for this Atlanta audition. So I just decided I'm not going to use a rotary. And I just thought if I play behind a screen with a great color, it'll work. It'll be okay. And that was the decision I made. I'm not recommending anybody else make that decision. I'm just telling you the truth about how this process went for me. So, I got to the audition, and the audition day, I think my round was at 10 a.m. I think. So I got there at 9 a.m. and then I probably warmed up from about 9 to 9:30. I did basically a truncated fundamentals warm up routine where I covered all the bases I wanted to cover. Excuse me. And then I just rested because they told me they were going to come get me 10 or so minutes before the round started. So I just rested. And then when they came to get me, they said it was 10 minutes. I played the first excerpt just to make sure it felt good and I knew where that was. And then I left the room. And so the first round was Leonore 2, the offstage solo. And then it was Pictures at an Exhibition, the Promenade. And then Parsifal. That was the excerpt that was supposed to be on rotary, and then Petrushka, and then Mahler 5. So I walked over to sort of this little holding area. The audition in Atlanta, there's like a little holding hallway, I guess, where they were like, you could leave your stuff here, and then you would walk up this large staircase and then go to the hall. And so they would they would have you drop your stuff off, and then you could just bring your trumpets up and then wait backstage. So I was backstage, and I'm not telling this part of the story because I'm trying to get anybody in trouble, because to me it's a funny story. That's why I'm telling it. But anyway, I pulled my one trumpet out, and the proctor that was there would notice that I only had one trumpet while everybody else was bringing two. So the proctor said, "Do you have your other trumpet?" And I said, "No, I don't have that. I don't own that trumpet." So I just thought it would be fine if I didn't play, or if I didn't use it. And the proctor was concerned because they knew that the rotary was required. And so the proctor got on their radio and began radioing and saying, "We have a candidate without a rotary. What do we do? Should we let the candidate play?" And I was like, I hope I get to play, And they determined that what they would do is let me play. And if the committee heard anything that they didn't like, they could just deal with it, which I thought made sense. And so, again, the proctor was wonderful to me. Everything was really, really great. I'm not worried about this. But I could understand the concern because the Rotary said it was required, or the list said the Rotary was required, and everybody else showed up with a Rotary. So when it was my turn to go on stage, I walked on, and I played what I perceived to be basically the best round I've ever played in my life. I was very happy with it. And from where my headspace was at, I got what I wanted from this audition. It was like right there. I was like, okay, I feel confident my audition process will lead me to be able to prepare at a high level. I was like, I'm done. I'm good. It was kind of like a cloud nine kind of high. I was feeling great. But in my head, I was like, but if it doesn't work out because I don't have a rotary, that's totally fine, right? Like, it wasn't a big deal to me because I wasn't thinking I was even going to go past the finals. So none of this was a big deal to me at all because of where my headspace was. And I think that was part of what helped me be successful. At any rate, here is the round. I'll just share it real quick. Here is the first round from the audition that I played in Atlanta. All right, so as you can hear, it was a good round. It was a very solid round. I was very happy with it. There was that hilarious restart in Petrushka. You probably noticed that I cut out some of the sound in between because it was just a long time. And I think actually I want to share with you what I was doing in between excerpts. This is something I had not done in any other audition before, but it's something that Ben Gunnarsson said in his podcast interview with me about his President's Own audition that he was successful with. And then it's actually something a client of mine started doing because of that interview that I kind of stole from my client. And it's a box breathing thing, I guess. And so what you would do is you would breathe in for 3 counts, you would hold for 3 counts. I breathed out for 6 counts and then hold with no air for 3 counts. And I did that twice. And what this did, there were 2 reasons I did it. Number 1 is I wanted to obviously try to center myself and get everything reset after every excerpt, depending on how much adrenaline was running in my body. And number 2, it made sure that I didn't rush the process because I have a tendency to rush from excerpt to excerpt if I'm not careful. So it did serve those 2 purposes. So, and then the other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is when I did the box breathing, I would just calmly do the first set of box breathing. And then when I did the second set, I would breathe in for 3, hold for 3. And when I breathed out for 6, that's when I started sort of sitting up in my chair again and like getting set. And then after I had held for 3, it was almost like a Pavlovian switch flipped. And I was like hearing the music ahead of, a couple of bars ahead of time. Or if it was something like pictures, I was like visualizing the conductor giving me the downbeat. And I was really locked in the audition in terms of like my mental space. It was like nothing was really going to shake me, which was a cool feeling. I will also attribute some of this to the beta blocker that I took. The first beta blocker audition, or the first experience I had with beta blockers was in Cincinnati. And I took the beta blocker, and it totally worked. The reason I was interested in taking it is because the previous audition before that, St. Louis, I felt very prepared. I felt ready to go, but I didn't take a beta blocker, and it was like I was fine. Everything felt great until I went and sat down on the stage, and then my heart rate rose like 20 beats per minute in an involuntary manner, right? So I was like, okay, I want to try beta blockers for the next one to see. And it totally worked, but I got dry mouth on stage, and so things didn't go well. And I know dry mouth can be an effect of beta blockers. And so this time around, I took a beta blocker for like a concert. I don't really get nervous for my concerts here in Alabama. So I took a beta blocker for a concert here just to see, will I still get dry mouth? I didn't get dry mouth, so I knew, okay, the beta blocker isn't necessarily the culprit. So, the morning of the audition, I woke up fairly early, and got ready to go. And then I drank probably 3 or 4, glasses of water. And in the first one, I'd take a pinch of salt and threw it in the water for some electrolytes because I was thinking I wanted, like, the electrolytes is what's going to help keep me hydrated. And then I took my beta blocker about, I can't remember, it was like 2.5 or 3 hours in advance. I can't exactly remember. I think I was supposed to play. Ended up playing around 10:30. I think I took the beta blocker around 7:45, so a little less than 3 hours in advance, I think. So that certainly contributed. I didn't feel nervous at all. My body felt normal. I felt like I could play like me. Now, I will say you should consult with a doctor before doing this and everything like that because I'm not a medical expert. Like, you got to say that because it's true. But also it's important to understand that a beta blocker will only solve the physical symptoms that you may be feeling. If your head is all over the place, it's not going to solve that. So you got to still do that work to get your head in a good place and control what you're thinking. But yeah, I cut out in that recording, I cut out all of the box breathing I was doing because I just so it wasn't quite as long of a listen. So I finished the round. I walked off stage. I thanked the proctor for everything and just said thanks for letting me play. I really appreciate it. And I was feeling really good. I wasn't expecting anything. I was just like, man, I did what I set out to do. About 30 minutes later, I got a text that I had advanced to the semis, and I was, over the moon. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I can't believe I advanced. And then I got in that same text, it was like, you'll need a rotary trumpet for the next round. Maybe you can borrow one from somebody. So I had seen a friend of mine named Alex Mayon, who's principal of Louisiana, and I called him, and I just said, Alex, this is my Alex, this is my situation. Can I borrow your rotary for the next round? He had also advanced to the semis. And he was like, sure, like I would hope that somebody would do that for me or you would do that for me if I was in the same position. So I was like, great, I've got that solved. And then, my next round was at 4. So I hung out for a couple of hours. And then I think I took like the beta blocker dosage I took first was 10 milligrams. I'm a bigger guy, so 10 milligrams wasn't too much. And then I think I took another maybe 5 milligram dose an hour or so before so I took it at like 2 or something. I can't remember exactly. But I did take a smaller dose. And one of the challenges with beta blockers is if you take too much, it kind of numbs you out. And so the dosage is right. And so if I were somebody, I would experiment with taking not very much, like 5 or maybe 10 milligrams, just seeing how that feels, and then maybe building up from there. But just so we're all clear, a lot of people take beta blockers for auditions. It's not an uncommon thing. If you don't do it, great. But it doesn't mean that if you do take it, you're like cheating or you're not as good or anything like that. Just wanted to get that out there. Okay. So I go back at 3 o'clock for the semis, and I was told when I got there, you are number 13. We are on number 4, and the rounds are taking about 20 minutes. So I did the math, and that meant I was going to be sitting for 3 hours. And so I went and found Alex and asked him if I could borrow the rotary. And I played on it. He had a Rico Kuhn rotary, and I played it, and it felt great. I was like, this is going to be fine. Everything is going to be okay. And so I gave the rotary back to him and had a chat with some friends that I hadn't seen in a while. And then I went into my practice room, or the room that they gave me, and I started watching a video game streamer that I like play the new Mario Party game for a couple of hours. When it was my turn, so I actually did not really play at all in terms of re-warming up or anything like that. I did touch a couple of the excerpts, but that was very early on. So I ended up sitting for a couple of hours without playing. And then when they came to get me for my 10 minutes, I played the first excerpt again, just sort of, quote, re-warmed up a little bit, and I was feeling good. The second round was the exposition of the Haydn, and then the Mahler 3 post-horn solo, the first 2 sections, Schumann 2, that's the one on rotary, the Einheldenleben battle scene, Gershwin piano concerto, second movement, Alpine Symphony, the high D glacier scene lick, Bartok Concerto for Orchestra, the beep-ba, beep-ba-ba-ba-dee-da-da-dee-da, from the fifth movement, and then the opening of the fifth movement of Mahler 7. So quite the round. It was quite the semifinal round. I was very confident I could do it in terms of the actual physicality of it. Felt like I was going to be able to get through it. And so I was feeling good walking in. Again, I wasn't too nervous or anything like that, and I felt like I had a good plan for how to keep my head engaged in the right things. So walked on stage. It's kind of funny. Alex played right before me in this audition, And so he walked off stage and just handed me his rotary as I was walking on stage. And so I played the Haydn. I felt like that went really well. And then I started playing the Mahler 3 post-horn solo, and I felt like I was having response issues. And I just chalked it up to, this is the second round in one day. That's hard to do. I know a lot of players who are great players that playing 2 rounds in one day is something that's a struggle. I was still playing okay, and my head was I was still committed to the music I was trying to make. I was just noticing that I don't think I was playing quite as refined as I wanted to. And so in my head, I thought it was over. I thought I was done. I didn't necessarily give up, but I was like, it would make sense if I didn't advance. This is this is like a semifinal round. There's a bunch of great players in this round. But I just stayed in the fight. And I think that's one thing I did that was really good is I did not give up. At no point did I give up and say, well, this doesn't matter anymore. I just kept trying to make as much music as I could. And after I finished the Mahler, I waited for them to say thank you next, but I didn't hear it. So I said, all right. And I picked up the rotary to play Schumann, and I played the first note, ba. And then I tried to play the second note, and only air came out of the instrument. And I was like, oh no. Oh no, this is going to be harder than I thought. So this is a time where I basically really focused hard on just keeping the air moving at my aperture and not really. I just wanted to keep that vibration at my aperture happening so sound would just continue to come out. I felt confident I knew what volume to play and all that kind of stuff. I just needed to keep the sound going. I played the excerpt. I feel like I played well. There was another note, though, that was just air. And I was like, for sure, this has got to end now. And I did not get cut after that excerpt. And I was like dumbfounded because I really felt like I was just playing poorly. And again, this is going to be a lesson that I feel like is important is you have no idea what the committee is valuing. So you may be thinking, oh, based on these things, it sounds terrible, but you may be doing something else that they really like. And all they want you to do is just recover and just pull it together and sound good, and then it might work out. So I stayed in the fight. So then I set up to play Ein Heldenleben, and it was a good run. It wasn't necessarily the clearest or cleanest run, and I kind of messed up the last line where it goes into the upper register, but I felt like I played well, but I was pretty sure that was going to be the end, and I did not get cut. So I thought, all right, here we go. I turned the page for the Gershwin, and then I heard, would the candidate do that again, please? And I was so confused because if you're unaware, when a committee asks you to do something again in an audition, it's almost always a good sign that they are interested in you and they want to give you another chance to sort of redeem yourself. So not only were they not going to cut me, they were interested in what I was doing. And I was, like I said, I was so confused. But I played the last phrase of Heldenleben, and it went well. I feel like I nailed it that time. And then for the Gershwin, Alpine, Bartok, and Mahler, I just hit a second wind, and I felt like I nailed it all. It was among some of the best playing I had done, and I was just freaking out. I was like, how is this how this round went? It was very confusing. I felt good about how I played, and when I walked off the stage, I was just thinking, I'm probably not going to advance, but maybe there's a possibility, right? Here's that round again. Again, I did all that box breathing in between, but I cut all of that out so we could go from excerpt to excerpt more quickly. Here is how I sounded on the semifinal round. Okay, so that's how I played, and I was convinced that there was probably no chance I was going to advance, but I was pretty happy that I got through the whole round, and then before I was out of the parking lot, I had found out that I had advanced to the finals, and I was kind of floored. I was kind of dumbfounded. I just did not think that that was going to happen. Obviously, I was grateful for that. And the reason I told you about all those auditions that I took at the beginning and those 8 auditions between Alabama and Atlanta, that was 11 years of auditioning where I didn't advance, just so we're clear. I cried on the way home. I cried while I was driving home because it was such a cathartic release where I felt like it's not over. Like, maybe my auditioning career doesn't have to be over. I'm not saying I would win every audition I go to, but maybe I've still got some fight left in me. You know, I'm 36, and so to have gotten to the finals of that audition at this stage in my life was not something that I thought was going to happen. And I think it's a result of the past couple of years of putting an emphasis on trying to develop a great process. For me, I was developing it because I wanted to teach it to other people. But it was sort of had this effect of also helping me prepare better. And so now my philosophy on auditioning is very much every audition should be an experiment. Do everything you know how to do, commit to it 100%, write a statement so that you know why it matters that you would commit 100%. And then when you get to the audition, just play the very best you can and observe the result. If you don't get the result you want, ask yourself, what could I do differently next time? Make that new plan for the next audition and assume because you have made a new plan that will address some of the things you didn't like from the previous audition that you will have a better result. Eventually, you will have refined your audition process enough that you'll just have the right recipe and things will click and you'll play the way you're supposed to play and the committee will like it and you will win the audition. But focusing on the outcome and stressing yourself out to win it isn't going to get you there any faster. And so that's part of this process that's a hard pill to swallow, is that it might take some time. And focusing on how you're not good enough because you can't advance or you can't win is not the right thing to focus on. The right thing to focus on is, if I really want to win a job, how can I keep getting better at the process of auditioning? How can I keep learning information? I've got tons of it on my podcast. I've got tons of it on my YouTube channel. There are other people out there putting out great content related to this. How can I learn from these people, and how can I make a better process? Because that's why I feel like I was successful. I didn't necessarily set out to win the audition, as we talked about, but I did set out to have a process of preparation that would lead me to play with freedom and confidence in the audition. In this particular case, it worked out, and I made it to the finals. And I was just like, I don't even remember, like, I was just overwhelmed with what that feeling was like to have achieved after so much, if you want to call it failure. I don't really call it failure, but so that was a very cool feeling. And almost immediately, I was like, I have to come back for the finals. I can't just stop here. It was like, oh, maybe me saying I wanted to win the finals. I don't care about this job. It's possible that was also a defense mechanism, right? Like, I just was like, oh, I don't care about that, to keep myself at bay, when really maybe I actually did care about it. I just didn't want to like let myself, get too lost in like, well, I want to win this audition and stressing myself out. And so that night I contacted the trumpet professor at Auburn University, Emory Harvison. I had met him about 3 weeks before the prelims when we played The Wizard of Oz at Auburn, and we had lunch together, and I was telling him about this audition, and I told him that, also, like, it says rotary required, and I don't have a rotary, and he said, well, you could borrow my rotary, and I was like, I think it'll be fine. And obviously it was, in this case, fine, but I didn't want to go to the finals not having had a rotary, so I called him and asked if I could drive through Auburn and pick up his rotary on the way back to Birmingham. He agreed, and he is like one of the reasons I felt like I was able to be successful in this audition, because he was just so giving. So I'm very grateful to you, Emory, if you're listening to this. So I had 2 weeks between the semifinals and the finals. I now had a rotary trumpet that I could work with, and so you do lots of long tones, scales or arpeggios, just trying to learn the intonation tendencies of this instrument. They're different than a piston trumpet. Also, kind of like the resistance point is, so there's just some things to learn to make it feel good. And I wrote a new I wrote a new statement for the finals. It also looks like this was on the 12th, not the 15th. I wrote, I am the winner of the Atlanta Symphony Principal Trumpet Audition. This will give us flexibility to make the best choice for our family. It also demonstrates God's power and sovereignty. So, in this 2-week period, my wife Kathleen took a year leave of absence from the Alabama Symphony Orchestra, and she was teaching full-time clarinet at UAB, University of Alabama at Birmingham. She was interested in, she liked the job, and she was interested in the possibility of, throwing her hat in the ring to see, like, could I get a job like this and see what happens? She had spent 20 years playing professionally, and now she gets this opportunity to explore a different side of something she's interested in. It was very, very cool. But she found out in this 2-week period, she got an email saying that the job was going to be listed as DMA required and that she would just not be eligible to apply at all, which is a huge bummer. And so she looked at me when she found that out and she said, I think you should try to win this audition. And that is really when my mindset shifted from I'm just trying to have a good time and do well to like I am now mentally interacting with the idea that like I would like to win this audition. And so that is what it meant about flexibility. We thought, well, if I win this audition, we'd have interesting choices for, what we would do next year. Because obviously a job like Atlanta is amazing and the pay is great. And like the orchestra sounds great. And, like maybe there would be a career bump too in terms of like teaching or other festivals and stuff that would just be amazing. So we thought I should go for this, and if it works out, now we can like look at this option for our family. And then I wrote, it demonstrates God's power and sovereignty, because for me, I was floored that it was even there. And as a Christian, I believe God is in control of that and ordained that. And so I was just like, well, I don't think who knows if it's possible for me to win this, but if I'm able to win the audition, again, I would just look at it like my goal was not to win the audition, and so if I am able to, it would just sort of show that God has the power to do that, and that's what He will. That's like in this case, I had 8 auditions where it was not His will for me to even advance, and now we're talking about me maybe winning an audition. So to me, I was just floored, and so I just wrote that to just make sure that my headspace was there. So I accomplished this by making a 9-day plan for practice. So basically it was 3 days of rebuilding up some of the excerpts I hadn't practiced in a while because I knew what the prelims and semis were. 3 days of, just running the excerpts and recording them, and then 3 days of running rounds. So sort of a mini phase 1, 2, and 3. Everything I did built me up as the winner. I did mental work to strengthen my mind. I didn't overplay, so I would be fresh at the audition. I visualized being in the finals and feeling confident. Most importantly, I played the way I play. When I play like me, no one can beat me. And so that's the statement that I wrote a bunch of times. And then I also started writing these little mini statements. It is like me to be compelling. It is like me to be confident. It is like me to be focused when performing. And I just started writing that. And so that became the framework. When I listened to a recording of myself, I asked, is this compelling? Is it confident? Was I focused when I was doing it? I also started writing later, it is like me to play with ease. Did it sound easy? This became the framework for how I was listening to myself. I certainly wanted to play consistently and in tune with good rhythm, but really the thing I was focused on is it easy? Is it compelling? Is it confident? Was I focused when I was performing? These are the things that I was most focused on making sure was happening in this last period of preparation. I remember also, I had a couple of rounds when I played for, we had some kids shows maybe a couple of days before the final round. I can't remember exactly. Maybe it was the week before, but I played some rounds for, it was our principal tuba, Andy Miller, our principal horn, Valerie Sly, and then Everett Burns, who is Valerie's husband, also plays horn. He subs a lot of places. He subs here. He was in the Virginia Symphony. He's just a great musician. So I played for them, and I remember it was something like we had the kids show, and then we finished the concert, which is not a heavy concert, but it was there was stuff in there, and then the kids left, so I waited for an hour for the kids to dissipate, and then I got my instruments, and then they made a round for me, and then I just started playing. I didn't re-warm up, I just sat down and started playing, and I was playing well. And so I was trying to build confidence that there was no scenario in the finals that they could throw at me that I wouldn't be able to be successful on. If I had 30 minutes to warm up, great. If I had 3 hours to warm up, fine. If I had no time to warm up, fine. I can do that. That's the kind of confidence I was trying to build. And there were 5 of us in the finals, and I was 4th in the finals. And I will not be able to remember all the final round, but I'll try. It was the exposition and the development of the Haydn. And then we could put the Bach Magnificat on piccolo anywhere we wanted, so I put it next. And then I think it was Pictures at an Exhibition, Promenade, and then I think it was Mahler 5 opening, and then the Mahler 5 lyrical solo. And then I think it was Petrushka, and then Mahler 3 post horn solo. And then it was Alpine Symphony High, the Glacier Scene. Then another lick from Alpine that's a little bit later. I call it Alpine Lyric because it's this long lyrical solo. And then Parsifal on Rotary, and then it ended with the opening of Fifth Movement of Mahler 7. There's one more excerpt in there that I'm missing. I can't remember. You'll hear it when I share the round. But so it's a long round. It's a long, brutal round. And I went out there, and a couple of notable things that I remember from this round are when I was preparing the Haydn, the lick that goes up to the E flat in the B flat trumpet part, literally every single time in my preparation, from the beginning of my preparation on, when I was running this excerpt from start to finish, I'm going to perform this excerpt, I missed that note every single time. I would back up and start right before it and build myself up to it, and I would be successful. So I was successful a lot, but I had never nailed it in a run at any point. I got close, and it was kind of squirrely, but it never felt strong and confident. And the only time in my entire process that I did it correctly was in the audition. So that was a good time for it to go, at least, it was for it to come together. And then the other thing I remember about that round was I remember for the High D Alpine Glacier scene, excuse me, I missed one of the D's in that excerpt, and they asked me if I would do it again. And I was in my head, I was like, I'm not sure I could do it again. I'm not sure I can do it better than what I just did. But I did my box breathing. I recentered. I was like, I'm not going to walk into the excerpt thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I'm going to walk into the excerpt with the same approach that I did, every time I've nailed it. And it's funny. I was trying to play the first D with so much energy, but I misgrooved it and I played a partial lower. But because there was so much energy I was trying to play with, I ended up playing, like, instead of a B flat, I played a B. And that's in the recording. You'll be able to hear it. But it's just like, when that happened, I was like, what is going on? Like, what am I doing? What are they thinking right now? But I would say the majority of that round went the way I wanted it to. I felt like I played well. And I distinctly remember leaving the round, calling my wife and just saying, I feel like I did my job. Like, I could see myself advancing, but I do feel like I left room for other people to play a little bit better than me, and it would make sense if they did. But I felt like I did my job. I was satisfied. And so we waited a little bit longer, and we were told that 2 people were going to move on to the next step, which was me and then Alec Blazek from Nashville. And that was that. And it was almost like, maybe because I was, beta blockered up, I don't know, but I almost felt nothing. It was like weird. And I remember when the personnel manager said to us, it'll be these 2 people moving on, he was walking away to leave. He was almost like mid-sentence, and I cut him off. And I was like, hey, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah. And I was like, do you validate parking? Like, that's where my head was at. I was like, I need to have my because like, it'll be like $40. I need my parking validated. And so what proceeded was a decently long wait while they tried to figure out what they were going to do, because the music director, Natalie Stutzman, the rest of her season from that point on was the entire Beethoven cycle and Alpine Symphony. So they were unsure. Like, giving us trial weeks would be difficult because, one of us playing Beethoven, one of us playing Alpine wouldn't necessarily be like a good, or a fair comparison, if you want to say that. So what they determined was that they were going to have us do an orchestra round. Oh, I'm so sorry. Before we do that, here is the final round from this is the recording of my final round from Atlanta. So that was my round. Sorry, I almost forgot about that. But back to where we were. So they decided that they wanted to do an orchestra round, which is essentially a round of excerpts, but now I'm going to play it with the whole entire orchestra. And so that round of excerpts was Pictures at an Exhibition, the whole first movement of Promenade, the opening of Mahler 5, Schumann 2, the opening, the second movement of Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, the muted Game of Pairs, and then the three really main excerpts from the fourth movement of Scheherazade, and it ended with the glacier scene from Alpine Symphony. So I've had to play that excerpt a lot in this particular audition cycle. And so my preparation for that was different. Like I didn't take nearly as many notes. Like I don't have notes from this period of time. I don't even think I made a statement for this period of time. I was just thinking, this is the part I know how to do. Like the audition part, that's stressful for me because it's like fish out of water type thing, but this is the part I know how to do. And so I obviously practiced the excerpts a lot with recordings, different recordings at different tempos, different styles, just trying to, and it was really not just trying to be like, how do I play well? But I'm thinking to myself, you know, like if before it is like me to play with ease, it is like me to play confidently. I was almost thinking like it is like me to make everyone's life easier when I play. That's the kind of headspace I was trying to go in there with. And so there's not really much to tell. I did put together like that was for later. So there's not really much to tell at this point. I was just practicing the excerpts with with recordings, trying to make sure I knew the excerpts really well, but I had been practicing them for a while, you know. So and then the day came. It was a very quick process. I was sort of trying to play for people and have them ask me to do things differently so I could make adjustments if necessary, but this is not what it was actually like on stage. On stage, we played everything straight down and left. And so it was very, very difficult for me to get a sense of how I played. I wasn't sure. I mean, I felt like I played well. She took a very, very, very slow tempo for Alpine. So I messed some stuff. I missed some more notes than I'm used to missing on that excerpt. You know, I put so much effort into trying, especially with that excerpt, to trying to make sure my upper register felt confident because Alec Blazek played right before me in the finals, and I heard the end of his round. I heard when he played Alpine Symphony and Mahler, and he sounded so good and so confident. And I was like, man, if I have to play Alpine again and I'm playing with him, like I'm going to need to step my game up from where I felt like I was at. So I spent a lot of time working on my upper register and pushing that. And so it was a little disappointing for me to not be able to just like represent myself as well as I had hoped. And then, you know, I got some feedback I've got a couple of friends who they played in Alabama. Now they play in Atlanta. So I had a couple of friends who were able to sort of say like, hey, like you did really well. Here are some things that we liked about it. So I could feel pretty good about it. And when I told people, when they asked, how did it go? And I told them, I would say something along the lines of, I feel like I did well. It wasn't perfect, but I played like me. And I started to ask myself after a while, what does it mean to play like me? Like, that sounds cool, but what does that mean? And I started thinking, oh, that must be like I played with ease. I played with confidence. I was compelling or whatever. I felt like I did those things. Now, again, if you ask the people in Atlanta, maybe they would have a different impression because it's like hard for me to actually know exactly how it came across. But that's what I felt like I was trying to do and maybe what I did. And I think that's now like one of the main tenets of what I think about auditioning, which is the goal of audition prep should be for you to be able to consistently play like you. The goal of audition prep should be for you to consistently be able to play like you. And so what does that mean? Well, you get to decide. What is it like you to do? And you could come at that from two different ways. One is you could say, well, what strengths do I have that I want to keep doing? Is one of your strengths your sound? That when people hear you, they're like, wow, listen to that. And you say, I want to show off my sound. Or is a strength of yours playing with great technique? Like when people hear you, they're like, wow, that's so clean. It's really refined and beautiful. Or, you know, is lyricism a strength of yours? And you're like, it is like me to, you know, play lyrical passages with like insane beauty. I don't know. Like, what are you good at, and what do you want to keep doing because they're strengths of yours? The other way to look at it is what kinds of, I guess, aspects, or I can't think of the word, but what aspects of your playing do you want to be true about you that maybe you don't feel like are true about you yet, that you want to use the process of auditioning to develop? So maybe you don't feel like you play the trumpet with ease, but you'll go and do a deep dive on this audition process to figure out what does it mean to play with ease. Or maybe you don't feel like you have a lot of confidence when you play. So you're going to use this process of auditioning to develop that confidence. So you're going to write from the beginning, it is like me to play with confidence, and then you're just going to search, what does that mean to play with confidence? Because when you learn what that means to play with confidence or to play with ease, it'll be way easier for you to replicate it when you know, like, what does that actually mean and how do I produce it? I think this is like a super helpful way to think about audition prep, because you're just giving the end of the story at the beginning, and then you now have like a framework that's really helpful for you to move forward. So it was it felt like a long wait at the time. It was about a week before they got back to me, and they said they were going to offer me a trial week. And I found out shortly after that, Alec had texted me saying he was not granted a trial week. And so I was the last person standing at this point, which was a crazy feeling. Alec's a beautiful player, and I heard a lot of his round that he played, the orchestra round, because he played before me, and I thought he sounded beautiful. So I was worried those mistakes that I was making was going to cost me. But for whatever reason, they chose that I would move on. And this is where things get interesting, because they offered me a trial week of Beethoven 6 and Beethoven 8. Now, when I heard that, I knew they were also doing Alpine Symphony. And so I was pretty convinced that if one of us was going to get a trial week from this, that it would be Alpine Symphony, because there's tons of stuff in that piece for the trumpet to do. There's loud playing, there's lyrical playing, there's soft playing. Like, you'd really get to see how somebody would play. But instead, they chose to give me Beethoven 6 and 8. Like, they were both in the same concert, which meant I needed the rotary again. And so I hung onto the rotary from Emory for quite some time, about 6 weeks. And I began playing on the rotary exclusively, trying to make sure I could feel confident. And honestly, I felt pretty good about what I was doing on the rotary. I have, like, on my notes, it's funny, like, when I first heard I was going to play Beethoven 6 and 8, my first thought was like, man, I really don't like playing Beethoven. And I've since learned that the reason I don't like playing Beethoven, or I don't like Beethoven, is because I'm always looking at Beethoven through the trumpet parts, right? Because I haven't studied them maybe as much as I needed to, or I wasn't as aware of what was going on. And so I was always just like, these trumpet parts, and I don't think Beethoven trumpet parts are really that great, but they're not that important, right? They're just like harmonic support or rhythmic support. And so what I chose to do through this process is I chose to say what I want to do for this trial week is I want to study really hard so I could begin to develop a process of studying that I could use to be able to potentially, if I get this job, I could continue what I'm learning here about how to study, so I could be super prepared for playing various pieces in Atlanta, or here in my job here, obviously. And so I've got all of this stuff of what I did, how often I played it, when did I play it, when did I listen to it, and then some studying for scores and stuff like that. And by the end of the process, I effectively had my parts memorized. And then I also felt like I knew the pieces really well, and I was enjoying them. It was kind of a cool thing. I felt like these are great pieces of music. My part's not that interesting, but this is really beautiful music. So I was walking in pretty confidently, and I feel foolish admitting this now, given what the result is. But I was really convinced that the only way that they would give me Beethoven 6 and 8 as a trial week is as if they were convinced that they already liked me, and that we just needed to do a trial week doing a trial week. They had to do it, so they were just going to give me the first one that was possible so that we could just get the process over with. That's the story I was telling myself, if not because it was true, which it wasn't true, but I was just trying to put myself in that headspace that, like, they like me. This is something that they want me there. This is going to be great. And man, the trial week was stressful. There were a lot of things about that week that were challenging for me. I've developed into a principal player over the course of time that I really try. Like, I understand in my hall with the orchestra I play with all the time, with conductors I work with all the time, I understand who to listen to and how to vibe things out and where the groove is. Like, I understand that enough that, like, I feel confident that I know to play here and how to lead and all that kind of stuff. And the Atlanta Symphony sounds great. This is what I'm about to talk about. It doesn't have anything to do with them. It was just different for me. And the setup was different from what I'm used to, and I found it difficult to hear. Even musicians in the orchestra will say this hall is kind of a weird hall to learn how to play in, and so hearing across was kind of difficult. I had never worked with Maestro Stuchman before, and so there was getting used to a new conductor. There were so many things in that week that were just, it was a lot to get used to. And so I felt kind of like a fish out of water. I kept telling people, I feel like a fish out of water. Like, I'm figuring it out, and I believed I would be able to totally figure it out in short order. But the rehearsals, there were just some things in the rehearsals for me that, especially rhythmically, that I was just struggling to feel confident with. And by the time the concerts came around, I felt like I had figured it out. So I was able to lead kind of effectively. But, there were things that Natalie was asking me to do. There are some parts where, talking about playing soft or staying out of the way and all that kind of stuff that it was just difficult. There were times where I felt like I was playing as soft as I could, and I was being asked to play softer. So I was pointing the bell in different directions, or like trying to point it down so it was less present. And ultimately, I kind of was feeling during that week that I wasn't playing as much like me as I would like to, for various reasons, And the orchestra members were very sweet. People were very supportive of me. It wasn't like, I didn't get the feeling that, like, people didn't want me there or anything like that. But I was struggling. And, the thing about playing Beethoven in an orchestra is I liken it to being a catcher in baseball. I was a catcher when I was in high school. And I was always told that a good catcher goes unnoticed. If a catcher's doing their job, you're not paying attention to him. And if balls start flying by the catcher, he can't stop them, or someone's stealing second and the catcher overthrows the second baseman and throws it into the outfield, people then start looking at the catcher and saying, what is this person doing? That's when you start paying attention to it. I feel like playing Beethoven as a trumpet player is a lot like that. If you're doing your job, no one's paying attention to you. You're sort of heard, or you're like felt but not heard. And I just feel that's a very difficult position to be in a trial week, where if you're doing your job, no one's paying attention to you really. And again, like, I'm sure there are reasons why it didn't work out. And I'm not trying to dog on the Atlanta Symphony here. This is not what this is. It's just me being honest about how I felt. I don't think I've ever gone to a concert where I heard Beethoven and I walked away thinking, man, did you hear how good that trumpet player sounded? It's just not an important part. When you listen to recordings of orchestras, I listen to a lot of European orchestras, like the Frankfurt Radio Orchestra, and there's like a German chamber orchestra. And like, there's parts where the trumpets will come out of the texture, but by and large, you just couldn't hear the trumpets most of the time. And so it feels like a difficult trial week to be successful on. I'm sure there were things that they were listening for that I was not doing. And so Again, I'm not trying to disparage them, but I felt like I did not get to show a strength of mine at all during that week, because strengths of mine are my lyricism and my sound, especially when I can kind of play out and play big and broad. And a strength of mine is leading and power and command. And so like something like Alpine Symphony, I would have been able to show those strengths off significantly more. And so that is more or less how the trial week went. I'm grateful for that opportunity. It was very cool to play with the Atlanta Symphony. It was stressful, like I said, to work with Maestro Stutzman. And so I'm okay, not living with that kind of stress, If I got that job, I was going to have to commute until I got tenure, and then my family would move. And so I was really not looking forward also to having to commute and be away from my family on a regular basis. And so there are things that I am grieving about not having this opportunity work out. But in many ways, I'm okay. Like, it's okay with me. There are other opportunities that I'm interested in pursuing, and I hope they find whoever they're looking for. I hope, in the next audition that they find that person, because nobody likes a no hire. Nobody likes to go through the whole process again. And so I wish them the best in figuring that out. And obviously in this particular instance, it wasn't me. And again, I know that I could have done better in some ways I could have done better in my trial week. And so I learned, I think, some important things about managing a trial week and learning how to go through it. And I'll be able to ask questions, better questions next time. And so, yeah, I think overall for me, that week was kind of, as crazy as this sounds, although it was stressful, I was engaged. I was really focused, and that was kind of fun. So, like, ultimately, I don't think it was a negative experience, even though the outcome wasn't what I wanted. And so that's part of the story I want to tell is if you can audition for an orchestra or a military band or some other ensemble, and you can walk away not winning the audition, but feeling like it was a positive experience, like, you'll never lose. You'll never fail. You either win the audition or you learn something that is going to help you do better and possibly win the next audition. And, like, for me at this stage in my life, that's like, learning things is interesting, right? Like, learning things is interesting, and you don't learn things when everything's going well. You learn things when things are hard and you're struggling and you're failing. And so, for me, this is not a failure. For me, this is just a closed door. I mentioned God earlier. I view this as God just closed this door. I don't view it as I'm not good enough to play with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. I just view it as this was a no, and there will be something else to pursue. And so that's basically the story. I know this is a long episode. I didn't think I was going to be able to stretch it out this long, but the final thing I want to talk about is what's next. Basically, what's next for me is getting back into content creation, getting back into the podcast and the YouTube channel, really trying to connect with people who want to learn about auditioning and learn my process for auditioning. And so if that's you, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram, either on Ryan Beach Trumpet or That's Not Spit, either one of those. Probably Ryan Beach Trumpet. I don't check That's Not Spit as much. Just like sharing these ideas. I plan to write a book for auditioning that will kind of go through my process and what I think is important. And I'm just looking forward to sharing this part of the process and the things that I learned, and then continuing to just get better and better and better at sharing information and being an effective coach and things like that. So I'm honestly excited for the future and what that's going to bring. And although there are things that I kind of would like to wish that the audition worked out for, it's okay. And I think if it's possible for anyone, whether you don't advance from the prelim round or you get all the way to a trial and it doesn't work out. Like I said, if you can have things that will make it feel like this was worth it, even if it doesn't work out, I think that's a good place to be. And so, yeah, that's the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope this was helpful, and we will see you in the next episode.